The kingdom of Valoria was draped in shadow, its spires and towers darkened by centuries of whispers, curses, and secrets that no crown could cleanse. Moonlight cut through the fog that clung to the cobbled streets, illuminating the silent statues of kings long forgotten. The people spoke little of the past, but everyone knew the story of Alara's father, the man accused of betrayal, whose choices had almost toppled the kingdom into chaos. Alara walked along the high balcony of her family's ruined estate, the wind tangling her dark hair. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, the unspoken blame in every whispered word she overheard in the market or at the gates. Her father's name had become a curse. Yet she carried herself with quiet strength, determined not to let history define her entirely. But fate, as it often did, had other plans. From the misty forests beyond the northern wall, a figure emerged. Cloaked in black, with eyes that seemed to burn like coals in the night, he moved with the precision of a predator. The villagers called him Kael, a warrior of unmatched skill, feared for both his power and his merciless will. Rumors claimed he had sworn vengeance for the sins of the past. And now he walked straight into Alara's life. Alara sensed his presence before she saw him. The air shifted, charged with tension, and the soft hum of the wind carried a strange energy. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear. Something deep, almost ancient, stirred within her. Kael stepped into the courtyard, his boots barely making a sound on the stone. When his gaze fell upon Alara, he felt the same strange pull she had felt. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the distance. Two forces drawn together by something neither fully understood. "You," Kael said, his voice low and cutting. "Daughter of the man who betrayed my family." His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, though he did not draw it. "I will make you pay for his sins." Alara's eyes narrowed. "And yet here you are, standing before me. Do you even know what justice is? Or are you merely chasing shadows of hatred?" Kael's jaw tightened. He should have been angry, but instead, he felt a strange tension coiling inside him, one that made the air between them almost electric. His heart, long hardened by grief and vengeance, refused to settle. Before he could speak again, a sudden chill swept through the courtyard. A spectral light flickered at the edges of the mist, casting eerie shapes across the walls. The air seemed to thrum with magic, the kind that had lain dormant in Valoria for centuries. A voice, distant yet clear, echoed through the ruins. "The blood of the fallen binds you. One will not survive without the other." Kael froze. The words pierced his mind like a blade. He had not believed in old prophecies or fated bonds. But something in those words unsettled him. His grip on his sword tightened, though he did not lower it. Alara stepped forward, her eyes wide with both fear and curiosity. "Do you hear it too?" she asked. "The guardian? The voice of the old spirits?" Kael nodded slowly. His instincts screamed at him to strike, to claim vengeance, yet his body would not obey. Every fiber of his being pulled him toward her, toward something far older and deeper than the wrongs of the past. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Shadows along the walls began to twist and writhe as if alive. From the darkness emerged a creature of nightmare, one of the cursed beasts the legend spoke of. A guardian of the estate meant to test those who dared approach its secrets. Its eyes glowed a cold blue, its claws scraping the stones with deadly precision. Kael stepped in front of Alara instinctively, his sword raised. "Move behind me," he commanded, his voice steady despite the surge of fear he felt inside. Alara obeyed, and together they faced the beast. It lunged with unnatural speed, but Kael met it with skill born of years of training and battles fought in blood and fire. Each strike echoed through the courtyard, the clash of steel ringing like a dark symphony. Alara watched him, her breath catching. Despite the hatred he claimed for her father, his movements were precise, almost protective. It was not the hand of a man bent on killing, but the hand of someone trying to defend. With a final, decisive blow, Kael drove the beast back into the shadows. It let out a shriek that seemed to pierce the very air before dissolving into mist. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of their shared breathing. Cale lowered his sword, his body tense. He could not explain the sudden relief that flooded him, nor the ache that laced his chest. Elara stepped closer, her gaze meeting his. "The prophecy," she whispered. "Do you understand it?" Cale shook his head, though his mind was racing. The words of the Guardian echoed over and over, intertwining with something deep inside him. Fate had drawn them together, binding them in a way he could not yet comprehend. And yet, he would not admit it, not now, not ever. "You are no ordinary woman," Cale said finally, his voice rough with unspoken emotion. "Something about you. I cannot ignore it." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was danger in his words, yet there was also a strange warmth, a pull she could neither resist nor fully understand. She took a small step forward, and for a heartbeat, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Then, as quickly as it had begun, Cale turned away. "This ends tonight," he said, more to himself than to her. "I will not fall prey to whatever this is." He disappeared into the mist, leaving Elara standing alone on the balcony. The wind whispered around her, carrying the faint echo of his footsteps, and the lingering words of the Guardian. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the quickened beat of her heart. Something ancient had been awakened, something that could not be undone. Elara knew the path ahead would be dangerous. Cale's hatred for her father could destroy them both. Yet the bond that had begun to form between them was undeniable. She could feel it in the pull of the wind, in the tremor of the stones beneath her feet, and in the strange heat that rose within her whenever his name crossed her lips. She returned to the main hall of the estate, her mind racing. The journal of her father lay on the table, open to a page she had never seen before. His handwriting was frantic, almost desperate. "The bloodline is bound. One cannot survive without the other. The curse will claim what is fated, unless the bond is acknowledged. Beware the shadows, for they know the truth before you do." Elara's fingers trembled as she traced the words. Fate, it seemed, had already chosen, and her role in it was far greater than she had imagined. As night fell deeper over Valoria, the estate seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Shadows lengthened. Whispers echoed through empty corridors, and the Guardian's light flickered once more. Elara knew she would have to confront Cale again and soon, but as she looked out over the mist-shrouded courtyard, her heart clenched with both fear and longing. The man who had sworn vengeance might also be the one who could save her, or perhaps doom her entirely. And somewhere in the shadows, Cale paused, feeling the invisible thread that pulled him back to her. He could not yet admit it, but the prophecy had begun to weave its spell. His vengeance would have to wait, for destiny had already cast its hand. Cliffhanger. In the stillness of the night, a new sound cut through the fog. A whisper that was not the wind, not the Guardian, but something darker. "They are bound," it hissed, "and only blood will prove their fate." The morning mist lingered over Valoria like a thin veil, wrapping the kingdom in silence. The ruins of Elara's estate were still tinged with the shadows of the previous night, the spectral Guardian, the cursed beast, and the unsettling pull of fate that seemed to bind her to Cale. Elara paced the main hall, her fingers brushing over the pages of her father's journal. Each word felt heavier than the last. His warnings were clear, yet cryptic. The bloodline was bound, the curse unavoidable, and her fate intertwined with Cale's in ways she could not yet understand. She could still feel the echo of his presence in the courtyard. Cale had not come to her father's estate merely as a seeker of vengeance. Something stronger, something older, drew him toward her, and though she had been trained to steel herself, to face danger without flinching, she felt a pull in her chest she could not deny. The wind whispered against the broken windows, carrying with it a hint of smoke and frost. Somewhere beyond the forest, shadows moved, restless and patient. The cursed warriors of the north, remnants of battles long past, were said to stir again when the bloodline of the fallen stirred. Elara knew that the peace of this morning was temporary, Danger would return, and she had to be ready. Kale, meanwhile, roamed the edges of the forest beyond the estate. His thoughts were a storm of anger, confusion, and a begrudging fascination with Alara. He had sworn vengeance for her father's sins, yet every time he thought of her, the sharp edges of hatred dulled just a little. Her face haunted him not with fear, but with the sense that something in her belonged to him, though he could not yet admit it. Their paths crossed again sooner than either expected. Alara had ventured into the northern woods, following a strange, glowing trail that appeared only when the sunlight touched the dew in a certain way. She had been told of a hidden chamber within the ruins of her estate, a place where her ancestors had left relics and secrets of their bloodline. Now, with the guardian's words echoing in her mind, she sought answers. Kale watched from the shadows. He had intended only to observe, to ensure her safety without revealing his presence. Yet as he followed her, he noticed the determination in her step, the strength she carried despite her youth and the burden of her family's history. His chest tightened in ways he had long thought impossible. Alara arrived at the entrance to the hidden chamber, an archway of blackened stone covered in curling ivy and ancient symbols. Her hands trembled as she pushed the door open. The air was cool, scented with dust and old magic. Inside, the room was lined with relics, jars of powders and herbs, and books bound in strange, worn leather. At the center lay a pedestal, holding a crystal that pulsed with a soft, blue light. She reached for it cautiously. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the room filled with a hum, a vibration that seemed to resonate with her very bones. A vision flashed before her eyes. Shadows of battles, of warriors falling, of a man whose face she could not fully see, yet whose presence was undeniable. And then, the crystal's glow intensified, projecting an image of Kale, standing in the misty forest, eyes wide with a strange realization. Alara gasped and stepped back. She could feel the connection, the thread that tied their destinies together. Before she could ponder further, a shadow fell over the chamber doorway. Kale's voice, low and cautious, reached her ears. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "This place, it's dangerous, more than you know." Alara turned to face him, her heart racing. "I know the dangers better than anyone, but I cannot ignore what I must do. The prophecy, it is real, Kale. You feel it too, don't you?" Kale's jaw tightened. He did feel it, the thread that bound them, but he refused to speak the words aloud. "I feel many things," he said carefully, "but do not mistake them for loyalty or trust." Alara's lips parted, unsure what to say. The tension between them was electric, yet laced with caution and unspoken longing. Kale moved closer, careful, yet deliberate, as if the space between them could carry the weight of all they had yet to understand. "I cannot ignore you," Alara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Even if I tried." Kale's eyes darkened. Conflicted. He should have turned away, kept his heart guarded as he had for years. But he could not. Not when she looked at him with that mixture of defiance and vulnerability, as if daring him to see past the shadow of his vengeance. Before they could speak further, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a cold wind swept through the room. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls. Kale's hand instinctively went to his sword, and Alara's eyes widened in recognition of the danger. From the forest beyond, a low growl echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots crunching over leaves, hundreds of them. Cursed warriors, remnants of a forgotten war, were advancing, drawn by the rising power of the bloodline. "We must leave now," Kale said, grabbing her arm with a force that startled her. "Follow me." They fled into the forest, shadows chasing them like dark memories. Kale fought off the first wave of cursed warriors with skill and precision, his blade cutting through the mist with deadly grace. Alara, though untrained in combat, used her wits to evade and distract, tossing stones and weaving between the trees. During the skirmish, Kale saved her from a lethal strike, pulling her behind him just in time. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, a spark ignited a connection deeper than fear, deeper than duty. Neither spoke, yet the understanding was clear. They were bound by something beyond their control. After they managed to push the cursed warriors back into the shadows, they took refuge near a small, hidden spring, the moonlight glinting on its surface. Both were breathing heavily, hearts pounding from both exertion and the unspoken tension between them. Kale finally broke the silence. "You are stronger than I thought," he said, almost grudgingly. "Stronger than anyone I have ever known." Kubli. Alara looked at him, the moonlight illuminating the contours of his face, shadowed and sharp. "And you are more than the man who seeks vengeance. I see it, Kale. I see who you could be if you let go of the past." He looked away, conflicted, the struggle evident in his expression. "The past cannot be let go easily," he muttered. "But perhaps it can be tempered." Ilara reached out, her hand brushing against his arm. Neither withdrew. Instead, the contact lingered, small, but charged with the promise of something neither could yet define. For a moment, they allowed themselves to simply exist in the quiet, the world outside forgotten. But fate rarely grants moments of peace. From the depths of the forest came a whisper, soft yet unmistakable, echoing the words of the guardian, bound by blood, bound by fate. "Only together can you survive the darkness yet to come." Kale's eyes darkened. He knew the words were true, yet the realization terrified him. To survive, he could no longer rely solely on strength or vengeance. He would have to trust Alara. To trust her meant to acknowledge the bond that had begun to take root, a bond that frightened him more than any blade or shadow. Alara, too, understood the gravity of the moment. Their fates were entwined, and the challenges ahead would demand more than courage. They would need each other in ways neither of them had ever imagined. The wind shifted again, carrying with it a whisper of warning. From the northern edge of the forest, the cursed warriors were regrouping. They would come again, stronger and more relentless. And this time, Kale and Alara would not have the element of surprise. Cliffhanger. As the first rays of dawn broke through the fog, illuminating the forest in pale gold, Kale and Alara stood side by side, hearts pounding, knowing that their next encounter with the darkness would demand everything they had: strength, cunning, and the fragile bond that fate had begun to forge between them. And in the shadows, a figure watched, waiting for the moment when the bloodline would falter, ready to strike. The forest of Valoria was alive with whispers. Moonlight filtered through the thick canopy, casting silver patterns across the forest floor. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl reminded Alara and Kale that danger never truly rested. The cursed warriors from the north were relentless, and their approach was inevitable. Yet, beneath the tension, a different kind of storm brewed, one of emotion, trust, and the fragile bond between two souls bound by fate. Alara moved silently beside Kale, following the narrow path he had chosen. Her heart pounded not just from the fear of pursuit, but from the nearness of the man who had sworn to make her pay for her father's sins. And yet, every time their eyes met, every time he acted to protect her, a strange warmth and curiosity stirred within her. Kale's mind was a battlefield of its own. He had trained for vengeance all his life, honed his body and spirit to strike down those who wronged him. But Alara challenged everything he thought he knew. Her courage, her insight, the way she moved through danger without hesitation, it unnerved him. And worse, he could not deny the pull he felt toward her, a thread stronger than any oath of vengeance. They arrived at a hidden clearing, a place Kale had discovered as a child. A small stone circle, covered in moss and etched with symbols older than the kingdom itself, glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Kale led Alara to the center. "This place," he said quietly, "it has protected me before. Perhaps it can protect us now." Alara looked around, her gaze tracing the runes carved into the stones. "These symbols, they feel familiar. My father mentioned them in his journal. They are markers of protection, but also of binding." Kale frowned. "Binding?" Yes, she said, her voice low. They tie people to a purpose, a destiny. Perhaps. This is why we are drawn together. The prophecy, it does not just warn, it guides. Kale's jaw tightened. He wanted to reject the notion. He wanted to continue his quest for vengeance, to keep his heart shielded. Yet, standing in that circle with Alara, feeling the faint hum of ancient magic beneath their feet, he realized he could no longer ignore it. Fate had already chosen, and he was caught in its design. The sound of distant drums echoed through the forest. The cursed warriors were regrouping, and they would not rest. Kale drew his sword and handed one to Alara, who accepted it with a steady hand. You may not know how to fight like I do, he said. But your courage and quick thinking will matter more than you think. Alara nodded. She had never wielded a sword in anger, but she had survived the shadows of her father's legacy and the burdens of her family's sins. Survival had taught her patience, observation, and determination skills that might just save them both tonight. As they prepared for the confrontation, Kale noticed something new. Alara's eyes, usually calm and resolute, flickered with fear. Yet it was not weakness. It was awareness. She understood the stakes, and she was willing to stand with him anyway. The first wave of cursed warriors emerged from the shadows like phantoms. Their eyes glowed a sickly green, their movements unnatural and jerky, their intent clear, to strike down the bloodline. Kyle and Alara met them with courage. He moved with precision and skill, cutting a path through the attackers, while Alara used her wits to trap and mislead, leading enemies into obstacles and pitfalls she spotted along the way. Despite the chaos, they began to rely on each other instinctively. When Kale swung, Alara blocked and guided. When she moved, he covered her flanks. Their actions flowed together, unspoken communication forming between them, a dance of trust and survival. At one point, a warrior lunged at Alara from behind. Kale's hand shot out, catching her arm, pulling her to safety. Their faces were close, eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Neither spoke, but the tension between them crackled like fire. Kale's mind screamed to retreat, to focus only on survival, but he could not ignore the intensity of the moment. The battle raged on, pushing both to their limits. Alara's hands were cut and bruised, her breath ragged, but her spirit remained unbroken. Kale, too, felt the strain, yet every time he looked at her, every time he saw her courage and defiance, a part of his old resolve for vengeance softened. Perhaps vengeance could wait. Perhaps survival, and something more was at stake now. As the last of the cursed warriors fell, a sudden hush descended over the forest. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and cloaked, moving with purpose. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the figure from her father's journal, a shadowy enemy who had plotted against her family for generations. You cannot escape what is fated, the figure said, voice echoing like a shadowed wind. The bloodline must be tested. Only one will survive the trials to come. Kale stepped in front of Alara, sword raised. She will not fall by your hand, he said, his voice steady, though his chest ached with tension. The figure laughed, a sound that chilled the bone. You are bound by destiny, boy, they said. But destiny is cruel. Fate does not favor the strong. It favors the broken. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. The words were meant to frighten her, to sow doubt and fear. But she refused to yield. We are not broken, she said, her voice strong, echoing in the silent forest. We are bound by choice, by courage, and by the bond we share. Kale's eyes met hers. And for a moment, all the anger, all the fear, all the years of pain melted into something else. Something neither of them had expected but both felt. Trust. And beneath that trust, a spark of something far more dangerous, far more intoxicating affection. Perhaps even love. Though neither would name it aloud, the shadowy figure hesitated, sensing the bond forming between them. It had underestimated the power of connection. the strength born not from vengeance or magic alone, but from unity. Before the figure could strike, the ground beneath them trembled. The forest seemed to shift, as if the ancient magic protecting the bloodline had awakened. Roots snaked up from the earth, forming barriers between Kale, Elara, and the intruder. The figure cursed, retreating into the darkness, leaving only a chilling promise. The trials are not over. The shadows will return. Fate will demand its due. Kale lowered his sword, breathing heavily. He turned to Elara, whose face was pale but resolute. The bond between them had been tested in battle, in danger, and in the unspoken tension that neither could deny. "We survived," she said softly, though her voice carried more than relief, it carried hope. Kale's gaze lingered on her. He wanted to speak, to confess the pull he felt, the connection he could no longer ignore. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded. "We survived. For now." Elara's hand brushed against his again, brief and tentative, yet full of unspoken meaning. Neither moved away. The forest around them was quiet, yet the echoes of the shadowy figure's words lingered. Their bond had been forged in fire, but the trials were far from over. As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of silver and rose, Kale and Elara made their way back toward the ruins of her estate. Each step was careful, each glance loaded with tension and unspoken emotion. They knew that the cursed warriors would return, stronger and more relentless. They also knew that their bond, fragile yet undeniable, might be the only thing standing between them and annihilation. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, there was something else, a quiet, growing certainty that fate had chosen them for more than mere survival. Cliffhanger. As they neared the estate, the wind carried a whisper, soft but unmistakable. "The bloodline's bond is not enough. Darkness rises. Only together can you endure the trials to come." Elara looked at Kale, and in that gaze, both understood that the next trial would demand everything: strength, trust, and the courage to face not only the shadows outside, but the darkness within their own hearts. The first light of dawn broke over Valoria, painting the ruined estate in pale gold. Mist lingered, curling around the towers and broken walls like silent ghosts. The forest beyond remained restless, shadows stirring as though aware of the final trial to come. Kale and Elara stood at the edge of the courtyard, hands brushing, hearts pounding. Their bond, tested by danger and fire, had become unshakable. Yet the weight of what lay ahead pressed on them both. The shadowy figure from the forest returned, emerging from the mist like a specter. Its eyes glowed green, full of malice, its presence commanding the cursed warriors who had been scattered in previous battles. But this time, Kale and Elara were not alone, they were united, their connection forming a shield stronger than any magic or sword. "You cannot defy fate," the figure hissed, its voice echoing through the courtyard. "The bloodline must fall. Only darkness will prevail." Kale stepped forward, his sword in hand, and for the first time, he felt no hesitation. "Fate is not yours to command," he said, his voice steady, though his chest burned with emotion. "We are bound not by fear, not by the shadows you command, but by trust, by each other." Elara's fingers tightened around the hilt of her sword. "And we will fight together. We will not let the past destroy us or our future." Her eyes met Kale's, and in that gaze was a promise, a bond forged through trials, danger, and mutual understanding. The shadowy figure roared in frustration and unleashed the cursed warriors, who surged forward with unnatural speed. Kale moved first, cutting through the front ranks with precision. Elara's movements were agile, creative, and unyielding. She used the environment, the ruins, and the shadows to their advantage. Every step, every swing of their swords felt in sync, as though the bond between them gave them an instinctive understanding of each other's movements. The fight pressed them to the limits of body and spirit. Elara felt exhaustion clawing at her, yet she drew strength from Kale's presence. Kale, though weary, found a clarity he had never known. The vengeance that had driven him for years no longer mattered. It was replaced by purpose, by the determination to protect Alara and the future that fate had entwined with theirs. At a critical moment, the shadowy figure advanced, its power palpable, forcing Kael and Alara to stand side by side. The figure's energy lashed out, dark and cold, and Kael felt it pierce through his defenses. In that instant, he realized that brute strength alone would not prevail. He needed Alara not just as an ally, but as the other half of the bond the prophecy had spoken of. "Elara," he said, voice strained, "we must combine our strength. Trust me, completely." Alara nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. They raised their swords together, the blades glinting in the morning light. A pulse of energy passed between them, a resonance born from shared purpose, courage, and the unspoken bond that had grown over countless trials. It was as though their hearts beat as one, their spirits intertwined. The shadowy figure shrieked, sensing the surge of power. The cursed warriors faltered, their unnatural movements disrupted by the force radiating from Kael and Alara. The ruins themselves seemed to respond. The stones hummed, the wind stilled, and the faint light of the Guardian's magic flickered across the courtyard. Kael and Alara advanced, step by step, moving as one. They were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to claim their destiny, to redeem the past, and to prove that courage, love, and unity could overcome even the darkest of shadows. At the final moment, the shadowy figure lunged. A blade of dark energy aimed to strike Kael down. Alara acted instinctively, intercepting the attack with her sword. The collision of their blades sent a shockwave through the courtyard, shaking dust from the walls and rattling the trees. In the same instant, Kael's hand found hers, and together, they pushed against the darkness with every ounce of strength, letting the bond between them guide their movements. A blinding light erupted from the pedestal in the hidden chamber, the same crystal that had first shown Alara the prophecy. Its energy surged through the estate, radiating outward. The shadowy figure screamed as the power washed over it, unraveling the dark magic and breaking the control over the cursed warriors. One by one, the warriors fell to the ground, freed from the curse that had bound them for centuries. Kael and Alara stood in the center of the courtyard, chests heaving, eyes locked. The danger had passed, but the weight of what they had endured lingered. For the first time, Kael allowed himself to feel not just relief, but a profound connection to the woman beside him. "You are," he began, struggling to find words, "more than I ever imagined, more than hatred or revenge could ever describe." Alara reached up, placing a hand on his cheek, her touch gentle but full of certainty. "And you are more than I thought. Strong, but willing to be vulnerable. Brave, yet capable of love. We are stronger together, Kael. Stronger than we could ever be alone." Kael's chest tightened. He had spent years guarding his heart, fearing attachment, fearing weakness. Yet, in this moment, with Alara by his side, he realized that trust and love were not weaknesses, they were strength. The ruins around them, bathed in the soft light of dawn, seemed to echo their unspoken truth. The curse of the past, the shadows of betrayal, and the pain of generations had been confronted and undone, not through vengeance, but through courage, unity, and choice. Ilara's gaze swept over the estate, then returned to Kael. "We've survived the darkness, but our path is not over. We must rebuild, protect the kingdom, and honor the bloodline." Together, Kael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of hope. "Together," he agreed, his voice steady and sure. The word carried more than a promise, it carried the affirmation of their bond, the acknowledgement of destiny fulfilled and embraced, not feared. As they began walking toward the village, the wind carried whispers, soft and approving the echoes of the guardian spirit, acknowledging that balance had been restored. The shadows, once threatening, had receded, leaving behind only the gentle hum of life and renewal. Alara turned to Kael, a small smile playing on her lips. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if all of this, our meeting, the prophecy, The danger was meant to bring us together? Kale looked at her, the edges of his hardened expression softened by emotion. I do, he admitted, and for the first time, I am not afraid of what fate has chosen. Because it chose you and me together. The village beyond the estate began to stir. People emerged cautiously, seeing the light returning to their home, feeling the weight of the curses lifted. Rumors of the shadowy figure would fade, but the tale of Kale and Alara, the warrior who sought vengeance, and the woman bound by blood and courage, would grow into legend. The sun rose higher, bathing the world in warmth. And for the first time in decades, the ruins of the estate did not feel lonely or haunted. Instead, they felt alive with possibility, with renewal, and with the quiet, unshakable power of two souls bound by destiny. Kael and Alara walked hand in hand through the courtyard, their steps confident, their hearts steady. The trials had tested them, the darkness had tried to divide them, and yet they had emerged stronger not just as warriors, but as companions, bound by something deeper than fate, deeper than prophecy. And though whispers in the wind suggested that challenges would always exist, Kael and Alara faced the future unafraid. They had discovered that love, courage, and trust were forces stronger than any shadow, any curse, any prophecy. Together, they could endure anything. Cliffhanger, emotional close. As the morning breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of renewal and promise, Kael pressed his forehead gently against Alara's. Both knew that the bond forged in darkness was eternal, that destiny had led them here not to bind them in fear, but to set them free. And somewhere, in the far reaches of the kingdom, shadows stirred once more, hinting that new trials may rise, but now, Kael and Alara would face them as one, their hearts and souls inseparable.